Welcome to Workplace Whispers with Dr. Ogunlowo. Now, this is the podcast where we share insights, strategies, and expert perspectives on human capital management and contemporary HR issues. Dr. Olufemi Ogunlowo is the founder and CEO of Strategic Outsourcing Limited. This is Nigeria's leading personnel outsourcing firm that has managed over 200,000 plus employees nationwide. He has a first-class honors in civil engineering, a master's with distinction in water and waste engineering, and a PhD from Loughborough University, UK. Dr. Ogunlowo has also honed his expertise at top institutions like Cranfield University, Lagos Business School, and St. Charles Strategy School, Chicago. Well, beyond academia, he is a fellow of multiple professional bodies, a licensed HR practitioner, and the president of the Employers Association for Private Employment Agencies of Nigeria, Federal Employment Council of Nigeria, and Nigeria's Employers Consultative Association. Well, my name is Praise Zumba.
And I'm Tosin.
Tosin, that took a while. And of course, we have,
Nice
as
to
usual.
see you again, Tosin, and Praise. Yes.
Exactly. So on our last episode, we talked about fitness to role and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, still in the spirit of International Women's Day, today we're tackling a conversation that's long overdue. We're talking about job fitness versus favoritism. Are women truly given a fair shot? Now, it's an open secret that in corporate Nigeria, who you know can sometimes matter more than what you know. But where does that leave qualified women who aren't part of these exclusive networks? Now, the question here is, how do we strike a balance between ensuring women get fair opportunities without reducing, to filling quotas? It's a mouthful, but I'm sure we're going to have lots of
I was,
talking.
taking a pause to digest what you are saying, and I think we have to distill two things.
Okay.
First is, what's favoritism? And second is, how do we promote inclusion and have more participation of women? And those are two different things, because favoritism doesn't have a particular gender. You could favor a man, you could favor a woman, you could favor someone from your village, you could favor someone because it's your tribe, you could favor someone because you watch the same, you follow the same football team. And that's what we call the ethos mode of persuasion, because at the end of the day, it's persuasion. People make decisions on employment, they make decisions on promotion, they make decisions on assignment of task. So the question is, what is the fundamental reason why you have made that decision? So have you made that decision because of logos, which is logical reasoning? Or have you made it because of emotional sentiments or reasons that are not what you could call objective, so subjective reasons? And so we need to make that distinction when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to advancement in the workplace. And of course, it's about which one are we therefore trying to highlight today?
As against, as we said
Increased
earlier.
participation.
Increased
You could
participation.
argue if increased participation is favoring women. I would argue otherwise. So but let's start from favoritism, actually, because that will help us, especially as we talk about recruitment. That's the gatekeeper. That's how you bring people into the organization. So if you favor people in your recruitment process, beyond using, at the end of the day, don't forget that you made decisions based on your perception, right, when you are recruiting. And therefore, you are favoring someone based on what should then be objective reasoning. So, will there be favoritism? Absolutely. You must favor a candidate over the other. The question is why. So, if you favor, first of all, let's take out that argument that favoritism is wrong, because you cannot make a decision when you have two candidates before you and you have to choose one for the job. You have to favor one over the other. And so favoritism is a given in decision making. The question is, what is the foundation or basis of that favor? And so we're going to then argue as to whether that favoritism is coming from a place of logic or is coming from a place of emotions and sentiments or otherwise subjective factors.
Larry, let me paint you a picture here, especially in the recruitment space. For instance, I know I'm looking for a job, and then I have an uncle somewhere who knows an uncle somewhere who would put me in a position somewhere. I'm just trying to be very picky with my words here. And then, as against you actually having the skills for that job. You actually getting the credentials and the qualifications for that job. So favoritism based on who you know now, or is it based on what you know? Because in that context, that uncle will probably pick someone that he knows, not knowing that maybe there's someone else who can do that job based on their skills.
So we'll distill that again. It's best for us to look at these issues in manners that we can have building blocks. So the first thing is that it's not wrong to put in a word. And don't let's deceive ourselves. Everywhere in the world, someone can put in a word. And that's even why people ultimately, sometimes, people of faith, they go and pray because they want someone to put in a word. The Almighty, right? To say, touch the heart of that person I'm going to meet for this interview. That's putting in a word. But now let's bring it back to mortals, right? Your uncle put in a word to a friend to say, my niece is looking for a job. Absolutely nothing wrong. It will be if the employer makes that choice to hire you simply based on that introduction, then he could be putting his own organization at risk of hiring the wrong person. Now, getting an introduction, a foot in the door based on who you know is absolutely irrelevant, because at the end of the day, if the process is merit-based, it will still find those who are most suitable. You could harvest your relationships, you could harvest your experience, you could harvest your knowledge, you could harvest your assets, and therefore, what has happened is that your uncle has thrown in additional thing for harvest for you. So your knowledge and experience, your education, you went to school, your experience, you worked in 2 or 3 places. So those things are there in the basket for harvest, but someone has added additional factor into the basket for harvesting for you. There is nothing wrong with that. But what would be wrong is if the decision to hire is based entirely on that other variable that was added at the detriment of the fundamental fitness to role. Now, the question will be, if your uncle nudges your boss to say, look at him or look at her, I'd like you to recruit her. But you are less qualified than others. Now, let's assume this was your uncle's business. He will make decision that is best for him. But let's assume this was not his business and he's running it on behalf of the state, for instance. He could be more swayed to want to satisfy and bring in a niece, right? So those are the places where you then begin to look at what is contending with what. But at the end of the day, simply put, there is absolutely nothing wrong. In the business that we do, every day I ask people, if you know people looking for jobs, tell me, because that is our resource. So we keep asking, if you know someone who is good, who is looking for a job, there's nothing wrong in pointing or helping someone to find a job. But what would be wrong is if the recruiter places emphasis in making that decision on who introduced rather than the skills and competencies of the person that is introduced.
Not about introduction. So I want to believe that the life cycle of an employee, from onboarding, from your interview to your stage of onboarding, from onboarding to your training, induction, and getting on the job. So now, my question is, where does favoritism comes in when the employee actually gets on the job in terms of performance? Okay, maybe I get on the job, performing on the job, and my employer is about to make a decision that affects me. Does favoritism have a place in that decision making?
Again, like I said earlier, except we are trying to be holier than the Pope or to not be real with ourselves. This is workplace whispers where we say what the way exactly. Except we are trying to be delusional in the workplace, at home, in the society. There is that person who, by their conduct or performance, has earned the trust and admiration of others. Now, so what you then do with it is what we're talking about. So if there are 3 people working in the same place, reporting to the same person, is it likely that one of them might have a better relationship or connection with the supervisor, not by any other reason, but by the reason of performance. It's absolutely possible. Will there be one of those three that the supervisor can actually rely on and say, if I'm not there, I can rely on this person? Or call at 2 a.m. and say, I need you to get this done, and it's certain that this will be done? Yes. Now, is that favoritism? That would be a question. And so we must therefore define favoritism in this context as undue. Because if we're talking about undue, that's okay. But earned favoritism, there's nothing wrong in you earning the trust of your supervisor to the point that he can favor you and put in a word for you. Look, nobody's going to get a promotion if nobody favors them. Because when it comes to promotion, it's really about a decision that is based on preferment. Right? And what's preferment? You have it's a pyramid. 10 people entered into a class and one of them is going to be captain. How do you choose who is captain? By preferment. It's preferred over others. Now, why is it preferred over others? It could be factors of experience, it could be factors of performance, it could be factors of promise. It has not even delivered on the job, but there is the promise that it could. Because they all came into the class at the same time. So nobody has truly performed. So the point I'm trying to make, an employer should never be afraid to favor, because it is the foundation that matters. On what basis are you favoring someone? Who are you going to give a better performance incentive? Who are you going to give a better, bonus at the end of the year? Is it the person that delivered on the job for you, or the person that comes from your village? So that's the basis that we're talking about. But should you as an employer be bold? Now it's about how then do you manage it? So it's different. Making that boldness and having that boldness should not disrupt and have the tendency to cripple things within the organization, because people are now pointing and saying this is the boss's favorite. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that it is human and it is right as an employer, not to say to have privilege, so get it, as an employer to have criteria for selection. Okay. But when we go into a business establishment and you see employer of the week, employer of the month, what does that tell you? Someone has performed and is being favored, is being put out there. Everybody that comes into that employment sees their picture and say, oh, that's a good guy. So as an employer, there's nothing wrong in being bold to actually recognize. So recognition and reward. Now, you could label it favoritism, but ultimately, nobody gets promotion without them being favored, because promotion is a factor of preferment.
We're talking about on the job now. I want to take you back to what Tosin said earlier, talking about the employment process, and still bringing it back to women as we were talking about earlier. You mentioned something about the hiring process, where you said something about wanting to hire someone based on recommendation. Now, in this because we've heard talks about networking, telling people go out there, network, meet people around there. Now, would you be more comfortable hiring a candidate based on recommendation, or maybe in quote a cold hire, someone that you've not heard about or stuff like that, a lady or a man, regardless of gender?
When you're making a recruitment decision, you are making it based on a promise. That's it, basically. It's always based on a promise, because even if that person has performed excellently in a previous employment, the conditions are not necessarily the same. The environment is not necessarily the same. The brand is not the same, obviously, because she's moving from one place to the other. Therefore, brand equity might be different. The business processes and so on are not the same. So it is on the promise that this person haven't performed in the past. Now, for someone who has experience, in certain circumstances, will be able to or might be able to repeat that level of performance in your new job. So how can you make that promise? You can make that promise on referral. And that's why we say there's nothing wrong in somebody putting in a word for anybody. Because everybody who is recruiting someone is recruiting based on a promise, for performance. So that promise can come from a referral that has come. Oh, I know this person is good. Try him. So that's a referral. It can come from a recommendation, actually, which is based on what we have seen. We recommend that we, recruit this person because they can perform. It can also be based on personal experience. You have worked with them somewhere before, and you have seen them perform, and in this new role that you have, you feel to tap them to bring them to work with you. So there is absolutely nothing wrong. And employers should never be afraid to ask people to say, oh, I'm looking to recruit an accountant. Do you have someone that has experience in accounting in this industry? So, yes, it's also good. In fact, when you put in advertisement in the newspapers or social media or whatever, and people apply, they put their resumes. What are you doing with it? You are shortlisting. What does shortlisting mean? You are now the one making that decision based on your own requirement to go through their own experience and see which one matches what you are looking for. So you are now the one referring those people to yourself by way of shortlisting. So if someone has done it for you, which is why sometimes people use recruiters, or headhunters, because they are then going to go after the best in class and bring them to your table. So there's absolutely nothing wrong. Now the question would be, and I hope if we can't take that in this episode, we'll take it in the next episode, which is, then where is the place for that person who knows nobody?
I was about to come there. So who puts in that word for that person, especially entry-level people who don't know anyone, they've not worked anywhere, have no experience?
And that's where mastering CV preparation comes in. And then we can take that another time. Because if you can't speak for yourself, then who will speak for you? Remember, we talked about referrals. So you must be your first advocate. You must be the one blowing your own trumpet. So, like I said, we can't cram too much into this today, but important thing is that distinction between favoritism and nepotism is the clear evidence that your recruitment decision, your promotion decision is based on certain criteria which was predetermined, which you have now used to favor those who met those criteria. I'll leave it at that.
And I think we'll leave it at that too, right, Tosin? What do you think?
Although before we call it a wrap, I think I want to tell Doctor to, give this clear and balance and clear distinction between uncommon bias and favoritism. Because you mentioned the other time that an employee can earn the trust of his employer or his supervisor, and that, gives him that privilege, that sort of favor. So where does uncommon bias come in this?
The producers are telling us we have limited time for today.
So
let's take it in the next episode so that we can, we want to keep to time, right?
Absolutely, and we're keeping to time. But you at home and watching, make sure that you also let us know what questions you have in mind, what discussions you think we should have in our subsequent episodes, because we're right here. Workplace Whispers is a no-holds-barred conversation, everything that happens that occurs in the HR space. I'm Praise Mba.